Oh, hi there. You're just in time to listen to some strange stories I've come across the internet. I do ask to keep an open mind while I read these stories, which include a hospital ghost story with photographic evidence, a popular Reddit story you may have heard, a possible UFO sighting, and to finish off, a very creepy story from the Philippines. This story came from the subreddit r/paranormal encounters, and the story goes, over the weekend I was at a barbecue with some friends and we got on the topic of ghosts, because recently my husband's co-worker shared with him some pictures that she took when she worked at the Stanley Hotel. These were of a ghost in the hallway. They are interesting photos, but my friend then said, I can top that, and then proceeded to tell me that when he worked in a hospital about 10 years ago, him and another nurse were monitoring the cameras on the ICU floor and saw a child running in and out of the rooms. They radioed to the floor staff and they were told they didn't have a child in ICU at the time, and so my friend and another nurse physically went down to the room to investigate. No one was there. They get back to the nurse station and the nurse that had stayed there was stunned. She said, "You won't believe what I saw on the monitor after you guys left." She had taken a picture of the monitor and said a little girl appeared out of the doorway after you left the room and watched you walk down the hall. And then apparently this story and picture caused a big stir among staff, because a couple of days prior, a young girl had passed away in ICU after an anaphylactic episode, and some thought the image looked like her. The management stepped in and made people sign non-disclosure agreements, and had a whole process around this, because apparently paranormal activity is a very regular thing at hospitals. This whole story and picture have really captivated me the past few days. Everything he said seemed 100% authentic, but this image, I made him text it to me and it stated around the same time he mentioned. It is haunting me. What do you think? Is it real? Do these things happen regularly at hospitals? Yeah, I'd even go as far as to say even weirder things happen in hospitals. I've been told stories of patients who were at their final moments, claiming to see apparitions of loved ones who already passed. However, people who are in the same room with the patient can't usually see what they see. Then there are the stories of disappearing patients in South Africa, which can be seen as a case for spontaneous teleportation, but that's a different story for a different time. This story first appeared in r/AskReddit back in January of 2012. The story goes, my last semester at a certain college, I was assaulted by a football player for walking where he was trying to drive. Note, he was 325 pounds. I was 120 pounds. While unconscious on the ground, I lived a different life. I met a wonderful young lady. She made my heart skip and my face red. I pursued her for months and dispatched a few jerk boyfriends before I finally won her over. After 2 years, we got married, and almost immediately she bore me a daughter. I had a great job and my wife didn't have to work outside of the house. When my daughter was 2, she, my wife, bore me a son. My son was the joy of my life. I would walk into his room every morning before I left for work and doted on him and my daughter. One day, while sitting on the couch, I noticed that the perspective of the lamp was odd, like inverted. It was still in 3D, but just wrong. It was a square lamp base, red with gold trim on 4 legs, and a white square shade. I was transfixed. I couldn't look away from it. I just stayed up all night staring at it. The next morning, I didn't go to work. Something was just not right about that lamp. I stopped eating. I left the couch only to use the bathroom at first. Soon I stopped that too, as I wasn't eating or drinking. I stared at that lamp for 3 days before my wife got really worried. She had someone come and try to talk to me. By this time, my cognizance was breaking up, and my wife was freaking out. She took the kids to her mother's house just before I had my epiphany. The lamp is not real. The house is not real. My wife, my kids, none of that is real. The last 10 years of my life are not real. The lamp started to grow wider and deeper. It was still inverted dimensions. It took up my entire perspective and all I could see was red. I heard voices, screams. all kinds of weird noises, and I became aware of pain, a whole ton of pain. The first words I said were, "I'm missing teeth," and opened my eyes. I was laying on my back on the sidewalk, surrounded by people that I didn't know. Lots were freaking out. I was completely confused. At some point, a cop scooped me up, walked me across the sidewalk and grass, and threw me face down in the back of a cop car. I was still confused. I was taken to the hospital by the cop. Seems like he didn't want to wait for the ambulance to arrive and give CT scans and other stuff. I went through 3 years of horrid depression. I was grieving the loss of my wife and children, and dealing with the knowledge that they never existed. I was scared that I was going insane, as I would cry myself to sleep, hoping I would see her in my dreams. I never have, but sometimes I see my son, usually just a glimpse out of my peripheral vision. He is perpetually 5 years old, and I can never hear what he says. A strange and also a sad story. You have a dream of the person you love the most, only to wake up and realize that person doesn't exist at all, and was never part of your life. Weirdly enough, this seems like a phenomenon that actually happens often, where dreams tell a story of a parallel life in the dreamverse. Although this one is really weird since the dream seems to have lasted 10 years, so I can see how that can be traumatic for someone. Here's another strange story that was uploaded on r/paranormal encounters. So, last night I suddenly woke up around 3 a.m., and when I looked outside my window, I saw something seemingly hovering. My window was slightly open, and my curtains were fully open. I had contemplated closing them earlier, but decided against it. I can't really describe it without sounding literally insane, but it seemed like a hovering round vessel with 5 ring lights in red. Once I could really look at it, it started to move out of sight, but I could see it so clearly. I immediately felt vulnerable and closed my window and the curtains, and felt so unsafe alone in my house. My heart started pounding in my chest like I've never experienced before, and it was hard for me to calm down. It felt like a primal sort of fear. I didn't feel safe moving around my apartment for hours, and couldn't sleep until 6 a.m. I reached out to a friend who said it's probably sleep paralysis, though I wasn't paralyzed. I immediately moved to close the window, and have never experienced such a distraught feeling of being confused and terrified of what just happened. Perhaps I'm just a bit stressed or it's blurry sleep vision, but I can't shake how scared I felt. I can draw a little, so I can make a sketch of what I saw. I am a 31-year-old woman who did university studies. I don't usually entertain paranormal things, but this felt too real and stays etched in my brain. I had to somehow share this experience. So, my first thoughts when I saw the image was it reminded me of the old school UFOs if you looked at them from underneath. But she describes the object at 2 meters, or a little bigger than 6 feet, which is smaller than an aircraft, but about the size of a pretty big drone. One thing to note here, the uploader said it moved slowly to the right from the window when she sat up, so it seems like whatever it was, it did show some kind of awareness that it was being observed. From my point of view, it just didn't seem to care if it was spotted. It either got what it wanted, or it didn't find what it needed, and so it moved on. There are similar reports of orbs just observing people and flying away when they're spotted. Some people were suggesting hypnagogic hallucinations, which is possible, I guess. If you really wanted a rational explanation, it can be a hypnagogic hallucination under the right conditions. But hopefully, whatever this phenomenon was, the uploader won't have to experience it again. Okay, so a little context about the story that was sent to me. This story took place in the Philippines, and it was originally in Tagalog. So I apologize if the translation is not the best. This story was posted on June 30th of 2023 on Facebook. The story goes, this is Aurelia de la Cruz, June 30th at 5:16 p.m. I just wanted to share my condo experience story. When my live-in partner and I moved in together, the one in our floor only occupied 2 units. At first, I wondered why there were no people living in other units, or why is it not being rented out? Even before us, the unit was lived in 15 years ago. His first question was, "You can't be scared, right? You even love horror." "Horror?" I said. "Why? What's wrong?" He just answered, "For no reason. After all, we've been here for a year. We often play music or TV loudly, since we just live here on our floor. The one unit here has a bad tenant. We don't know the reason. I often wear AirPods when I'm alone, especially when I'm doing something. This is where it started. This experience is the event I will never forget. My live-in partner went to work while I was in the room. Our dog was barking, so I went to see what he was barking at. The door itself has a peephole. I looked and there was no one or anything. I'm an idiot. The AirPods were on low battery, so I just played them on the phone speaker. Because my live-in partner's aunt, owner of the condo, bought the phone and said to play whatever in the condo, so I won't be scared. Because my live-in partner's aunt, owner of the condo, bought the phone and said to play whatever in the condo, so I won't be scared. There was a little boy's voice that sounded like he was playing in the hallway, so I peeked through the peephole. I didn't see the child, but I heard his voice. I chatted with my wife. We have a house next door. She said nothing. She checked with guards in the lobby and even sent a guard up to our unit. The patrolling guards check the units in case someone from another floor is playing in our floor. He said there was nothing, but I noticed the older guard was pale. After a few days, I was curious because our dog was always barking at the door, so I didn't ring the bell and I just listened to see if there was really someone in our floor. I heard someone knocking on the door. In my annoyance, I went out. I looked at all the units. Nobody. I told my husband again. Okay, while I'm reading this, sometimes the husband becomes the wife and the wife the husband. I'm assuming there's a grammatical rule there, where depending on the context, it can either be the wife or the husband. But I'm gonna assume this was written by a woman, just because in the translation, they're addressed as ma'am. So I'm just reading what Google Translate gives me, and Google Translate is doing a really bad job translating Tagalog. He said maybe it's just my imagination. I was annoyed. I said next time I'll take a video so you can believe. One time I was in the living room. I heard a boy running and trying to open our door. I looked through the peephole and there was nothing. I hadn't gone far from the door when the door handle turned. I immediately looked. There was no child, but the handle was turning. I heard the boy running away and then back to the door again. I peeked under the door. There was no shadow, but the handle was turning. I was so scared, I called my husband and he said he would send a guard up. The guard went up and checked and said there was nothing. The guard seems to be in a hurry. After the guard left, the boy came back again. This time I could hear the mother shouting at her son. I made a video to show my husband. I can still hear the knocking on the door. That night, it was early morning. I was startled by a noise that sounded like someone was in pain. I heard her asking for help. I immediately went to the door to take a video and sent it to our lobby for the guard to visit. The guard knocked on my door and said, "Ma'am, I'm sorry. Today is the day that a mother and daughter were killed. Don't make a sound. You heard it from no one because the admin forbids talk about this. Just play music, ma'am, so you can sleep." Well, that was fun to translate. Seems like the story originated in a Facebook group called Let's Takutan Pare, which dedicates its page to online scary stories. They allow fictional stories as well, so there's always the possibility of this being an elaborate hoax. When I reviewed the footage, it seemed pretty authentic. The two videos show someone looking through a peephole, while there's a woman screaming in the background. I can't make out the words since it's probably in another language. About halfway through the video, a child is heard screaming. So from what I understood from the story, the screams are them reliving their murder. The condo obviously knows about it because they keep it a secret, so it doesn't scare away potential buyers. And there you have it, 4 strange stories from the depths of the internet. Hope you all enjoyed, and if you would like, you don't have to, but a like and some feedback would be helpful and much appreciated. So are these stories fact or fiction? A hoax or reality?